Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. It's Naperville Reads, our community-wide reading program where we're all joined in the joys of reading. 3 of the authors in this year's program are Paige Rawls and her book called Positive. Sally Walker and her new book is called Winnie, all about Winnie the Pooh and his origins. And Sarah Albee and her book Why They Wear That. 3 great nonfiction pieces. You'll learn a lot. Sally, it's so great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming to do Naperville Reads, our community read program, and to do all the schools. I know since we had a snow day, everything's being packed into 2 days, but I wanted to know from your perspective, because you've had so many books published and have done so many school events and events over the years. What's it like doing a community-wide reading program like this, where everybody's, engaged in reading the same books?
I've never done anything like this before, and what appeals to me is that you go from school to school and people are talking about the same book, or the same books in this case, because there are 5 other books out here. And there's, I think, an energy to that you don't see when it's just one author talking about his or her books. Mm-hmm. There are people bringing different perspectives to each of the things that they did. And I will admit, at first I was apprehensive, because we are 3 very different people who are on the panel with me, and I thought there's no connection here. But oddly, as we talked, it turns out there is.
The whole theme of this, to do nonfiction, to do informational books, and this was a new thing for us. But to speak to all of the 7th and 8th graders in both districts 203 and 204 was pretty amazing. So what was the feedback you were getting from the students when you guys were talking?
They were totally focused on what all of us had to say. There
cool.
wasn't fidgeting. There was, and I was watching as the other folks talked as well. They were interested in the story. They're not used to having nonfiction be a story for them. They think only fiction, and if it's not about dragons, if it's not about dystopia, probably isn't going to hold their attention. And I think maybe they were surprised to find out that a good story is a good story, no matter what.
What has always drawn you as a writer or as a reader to nonfiction and the stories that comes out of history?
I think that actually the roots start back when I was a child. My father was a storyteller, but he never told very seldom told made-up stories. His stories were always nonfiction stories.
Right.
And in the summertime, every year, this happened every summer for as long as I can remember, as it started to get dusk, my dad would go out in the backyard, sit in a lawn chair, and all of the kids from the neighborhood would come to my backyard, and we'd sit in a semicircle in front of him. And he would tell us stories about the Native Americans who lived in our town, the colonial settlers, people who had lived there even in the early 20th century, because my dad had lived there. And I can remember we always wanted to find out more about what he told us. And I remember him telling us a story about that in our town there were old copper mines from the Revolutionary War. And when we asked him where they were, and he knew where the entrances were, he would never tell my sister and me, because he knew we would go.
You would go.
We would go and find
for
them.
sure, for sure.
So the roots go back a very, very long way for storytelling in my family.
Well, you know what, in Ghost Walls, and especially Blizzard of Glass, and Winnie the Pooh being more of a picture book format, but it's the narrative, the stories are just absolutely brilliant when you read them. And the way you weave all of this factual information into it, is that hard making that narrative history, especially in Blizzard of Glass, because you're basically getting the story of Halifax as it's waking up in the morning and what's going to happen later in the day. But you're reading about all these different people and you're weaving these stories together.
It's difficult to know exactly how you want to put things together, but what I try to use is a normal talking voice in my writing, where I will say, well, this morning so-and-so got up and had a breakfast of oatmeal, and then you've got to remember, the folks across the harbor were doing things, and let me just tell you what they were doing over there as well. Everything that I write, I read out loud, because I always want to have that sense of, come on over here, let me tell you a story. I've got something that I think you'll find interesting.
So in Winnie, your newest book that's out, this is the true story of that inspired Winnie the Pooh,
Right.
and A.A. Milne and all that. So tell us a little bit about the journey, because I love to hear about your journeys of research.
Okay.
And where the seed for this began to grow, and what captured your imagination about where this all began.
So the real truth of that story is, I have an editor who absolutely loves Jacqueline Winspear's Maisie Dobbs series, and Jacqueline Winspear came to Anderson's, and I thought, I will go and get a signed copy. Yeah. So I was sitting there in the audience listening to Jacqueline Winspear talk in Anderson's bookshop, and she said part of the backdrop of this volume about Daisy is set with the Canadian Veterinary Corps. And she said, oh, by the way, did you know there was a Canadian veterinarian named Harry Colburn, and he bought a bear cub, and eventually that bear cub inspired Winnie the Pooh. And I am sitting there. At that point, I heard nothing else that Jacqueline said about Maisie. I was writing down Harry, and then I was thinking how many variations there would be on the spelling Colburn for his name, Winnie, and I'm just turning to my husband Jim, sitting next to me, and I guess I'm saying, "This is a story. This is a story. I've got to find out more about this." So it started with Anderson's.
I think that's so cool how you decide what you're going to write about. So this story, and I think everyone is so fascinated because everyone knows Winnie the Pooh. Whether you were read A.A. Milne directly by a parent or a grandparent, or you see Disney variations or whatever you've seen, everybody knows Winnie the Pooh. But to know this story about this cub, this North American black bear that ends up in the London Zoo.
I mean, it's incredible when you think about it, and that he really wanted to bring this little bear with him. I mean, to bring it across the Atlantic Ocean. She was at Salisbury Plain, where Stonehenge is.
Yeah.
And to know that afterwards, soldiers wrote letters to the zoo talking about how much this cub meant to them while they were in the service. Just to have something there that wasn't war related. Yeah. And they enjoyed her, and she seemed to like them.
So Sal, all the research you do and the journeys that it takes you on, it must be really hard to say, okay, I got to stop and I got to sit down and write this book.
I think the one that was the hardest to stop doing the research was actually Boundaries, the Mason-Dixon book, which I'm not talking about really here, but I had so much fun going through the old papers written in the 1700s. That was awesome, and I just couldn't get enough of reading that. I think the one, Blizzard of Glass, is a story I learned about when we lived in Nova Scotia. It's a story that grabbed my heart in a way that others haven't. I literally sat in the archives of Nova Scotia and read through over 200 survivor accounts.
Wow.
And I had a box of Kleenex next to me that I cried while I read the accounts. While I was writing the book, my stomach used to hurt when I would have to talk about how the ships collided, because I always wanted it to be, could this time they please not collide, and that 2,000 people would not die.
But these stories, I mean, what you have chosen to write upon, I find it so incredible how you find these stories, but how you weave it together, because it reads more, I think it reads more excitingly than any kind of fiction you can write. And I think now that you've written this Winnie book, you're going to have a much younger audience that's really going to love your writing too.
That will be
so what are you working on now? What's happening next, or what's got your
I'm working
your
on a book right now about the American chestnut tree, and the working title is Champion, the Comeback Tale of an American Tree. And it is a tree that basically, if you go to most of the barns on the East Coast, were built with American chestnut. And in the 1870s, a blight from Japan came over here and killed over 4 billion trees. Wow. They were the mainstay of eastern forests in the United States. And scientists are now working different kinds of breeding, including genetic engineering, to restore the chestnut tree to its place in the wild.
Oh, we can't wait to see that book. So I know you're going to come back.
Probably 2016.
Okay, fantastic. Can't wait for that one. Thanks, Sally. I really appreciate this.
Most welcome. I had a good time.
Well, Sarah, welcome to Naperville and Naperville Reads.
Thank you. It's been so fun.
Oh, I'm so glad. I know we had a little snowstorm that delayed all of you getting in, but how has it been? I know this is the first day and do some more schools tomorrow, but we're having 2 grade levels from 2 huge districts hearing the 5 of you talk about your book. So how has it been so far?
It has been so much fun. I have become really close to my fellow panelists.
Oh, that's so great.
Well, in the snowstorm, we were sort of marooned for a day, and so we are now best friends. And when we march into each school, or march out of a program, I feel like the Beatles or something, because the kids are so enthusiastic and wonderful.
Oh, that's so great. So I want to know, where did your love of nonfiction, of all those things real, come from, do you think?
I was one of these kids, annoying kids who was always asking why. I was the youngest. I was pretty bookish. I read the encyclopedia for fun. That was just kind of the kid I was.
Yeah.
And I think I've always had a penchant for history from unusual angles.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I think kids like it from that angle, though, too. So your new book, Why'd They Wear That? Mm-hmm. This book from National Geographic is so fun, like you said.
Yeah.
But it's going from 10,000 BC all the way up to even into the future, what fashion may hold for us.
Right.
But I thought it was so fascinating because it's not just fashion and what utilitarianism, but also high fashion.
Right.
But it's also military stuff that we would wear. So how did you do? Where did the spark come to decide to write this book? And the way it's put together, I think, is so cool.
Well, I think that the fact that National Geographic published it, they are kind of the only ones who could have published such a beautiful book, because they do such beautiful images. It's a funny book because it's not really the history of fashion. It's more history through fashion. Okay. And so I keep writing the same book over and over again. I keep writing the history of the whole wide world. But it was important to me to include the backstory of fashion, as you say, not just what affluent people wore, but the people who wove it and made it and harvested the cotton, and their story too. Many of whom are nameless and their names have been lost to history, but I think it's been a really important part of our history.
Yeah, well, there's the part in there about the whole industrialized revolution, but also too, on the East Coast and that whole belt were all the factories that would weave the cloth.
Yes.
And the children laborers that were used within a lot of those factories. So you have that section in there too.
Yeah, and doing the research for that, it was really important to me to go whenever I could. I went to the museum in Lowell, Massachusetts, because I wanted to hear the sound of the looms, and it's deafening. Yeah. And you really don't get a sense of that until you actually go there.
Right.
And even if not all the looms were on, and I can imagine it being 3 times as loud.
Oh, and the chance for injury and everything was so great.
Yeah.
So what kind of research did you do overall besides doing those types of things? And what were the fun parts of it? And what were the most surprising things you found out?
Well, all 3 of my past books, I've got one called Bugged, How Insects Change History, and The Poop Happened, which is about the history of toilets and sanitation. Yeah. They all had, you can't just open a secondary source and look in the index and necessarily find these topics. So yeah, there is a lot of field research.
Yeah,
I went, for the poop book, I visited the Paris sewers. And it was me and a bunch of 10-year-olds, and my husband was cowering against the wall, but we could stand on the grate and see it going by. It was really exciting. And so, for the fashion book, again, I talked to a lot of fashion historians. I met with a woman who used to work at Plymouth Plantation and who weaves silk the old-fashioned way, and she showed me and I was able to hold linsey woolsey, which is what slaves were dressed in, and I had not known until I was holding it in my hand how scratchy it is. And when you have a scratchy wool sweater on, it's almost unbearable to think this is what people had to wear every day.
Yeah.
So the research is fun.
Yeah. No. Is it hard? And I asked Sally this too, but when you're sitting down is it hard to stop researching, because that's that journey, you're trying to find just all those cool things about your topic, but then you have to say, okay, now I got to stop. I do.
I mean, there is a point where, whether it's the rush of adrenaline because I have a deadline and my editor is expecting it, or that you just reach a point where you sort of feel saturated somewhat, and I'll start writing, but I don't stop researching, because as I write things, I find that there are holes in the manuscript that I need to go back and do more research. So it becomes much more of a sort of intertwined process, the writing and the research.
Right. So looking at, starting at 10,000 BC and showing how things have changed, and I know I'm using this as the common threads that have gone through.
Ooh, I got to use that.
Oh, yeah. But that have, what have you picked up from that and what you've written this book about?
Well, the difficult occupations that so many people had to produce the clothing that the 1% could wear. And those are the people I was more interested in.
Sure.
So reading about tanning of leather, which is a dreadful thing in the past, the way they did it. They had to use, it's a very smelly job, let's just say.
Yeah, right.
And fullers who they were like the ancient dry cleaners, and they used stale urine to soak cloth and get it.
Right.
So it was, and the Mad Hatters, which everyone's heard about, but the way they had to use mercury to separate the beaver pelt from the fur.
Right.
So that's what interested me, is the people making the clothing for the wealthy, and then just the outrageous fashions. And of course, there's that comparison, like why they wear that, but then there's a lot of parallels to today. Well, look at what we wear today. And Botox and you name it. We still have mercury in our face creams. And
Yeah. I like the fact you had a foreword by Tim Gunn, though. That was fun.
That was a stroke of genius by my editor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was not my idea.
Okay.
But I was very happy when she proposed this, and in fact, Clinton Kelly is going to be blurbing the book on the next
really?
edition.
Oh,
so
fun.
I know it's
That's
so
great.
cool.
No, that's
so,
good.
and I think it's going to have crossover appeal to teenagers and older.
Oh yeah, and adults especially.
Yeah.
I mean, all
Yeah.
the different chapters, from military and what warriors wore to undergarments, the horrible things putting women into these things that really was torture.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you put in some great sections in this book.
Yeah, women have suffered a lot, but men have too. I mean, men used to wear corsets, and they had some outrageous fashions as well.
So tell us, what are you working on next, and what's your next journey taking you?
Oh, I'm so excited about it. I'm working on poison.
Ooh.
And in fact, one book seems to be the parent of the next. And with the fashion book, there was a lot about arsenic, because the Victorians were fascinated, loved the color green, and it was dyed with copper arsenite, which is arsenical compounds.
Okay.
And they knew it, but they loved it anyway, and the green wallpaper, which poisoned a lot of people. So I've always been kind of fascinated by arsenic.
Oh my
but
gosh,
there's
how interesting. Yeah.
But it's human history. It's not the natural toxins, unless it's really what people have done to one another.
Right, but all the different plants and everything that people. But yeah, the Victorians really had a fascination with different compounds.
Yeah. And it was so readily available. I mean, it was so unregulated. Any little Susie could go to the corner store, and in her little pinafore, she would collect a pound of sugar and a pound of arsenic. And
wow,
woe be to those who mix them up.
Right.
And it happened.
So there is something to that arsenic and old lace, right?
Yes. Well, and there's a lot of chemistry in this book.
That's cool.
Many of my books are kind of a mashup of science and history, which is what I love.
Yeah. So when is that coming out?
2017.
Okay. Well, you promise to come and see us when it comes out.
I'd love to.
Okay. Well, Sarah, thank you so much, and thanks for being part of our citywide read program, Naperville Reads.
Thanks for including me. I've had so much fun.
Well, Paige, welcome to Naperville.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh my gosh, we were so excited when we found out you could come and do our community-wide read programs, Naperville Reads. So I want to know, how do you feel about being part of this, where we're having a whole community reading the same books, and also, you're going to be talking to a lot of 7th and 8th graders from both districts. So how did it go today, and how do you feel about the whole program?
It went really awesome today. The kids were really interactive. They had lots of questions. I had groups of kids coming up to me afterwards, sharing their own, personal experiences or what their friends have been through. And so I think middle school is probably one of my favorite age groups to kind of speak to, just because the book, it's about everything I went through in middle school and, growing up. And so they can kind of understand, this is what I went through. I understand what you guys are going through now. And so it's been great.
Oh, so glad to hear it. So the book so far, how long has it been out? I'm trying to think how many months.
Since August.
Since August.
So
yeah. Well, that's about maybe
like
6 months. Yeah, 5-6 months.
6 months.
So what are you hearing from everyone, from kids who may have been bullied, or even parents, educators, anybody like that? What are you hearing so far? Because you must get a ton of email or people contacting you about the book.
A lot of the times, it's kind of the same thing. I'm inspiring other kids to share their own story, or I'm hearing from a lot of the parents I'm hearing from, it's either their kids have been bullied or they've lost a child to suicide because of bullying, or most recently a lot of the parents that I'm hearing from are parents that have adopted kids from other countries who are HIV positive, and they're trying to figure out the right time to tell their kid, you know, how to make them feel, you know, good about themselves and let them know, like, there's nothing wrong with you, and just really to kind of explain that once you tell someone about this, you can't take it back, so you kind of have to be prepared. So I think, I mean, that's my favorite part. I know my mom gets so frustrated sometimes because I stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning replying to like social media and emails. She's like, Paige, you need to go to bed. I'm like, but all these people are asking me these questions. I'm like, I just want to help. I'm like, that's why I wrote the book. So.
Yeah, well, that's incredible that you do that for so many people. You know, when I saw the book, and I first saw it when it first came out, and the foreword is by Jay Asher, who wrote 13 Reasons Why. That was so cool that he did the introduction, and what a great introduction that he did for the book.
Yeah. Jay Asher, I read that book when I was in like the beginning of high school, and so it was really awesome. And my editor from HarperCollins just happened to be his editor before, so we had that connection, and it was just really great that, you know, he took the opportunity to write the foreword, because I think both of our books, we have that, you know, connection about bullying, and it just keeps getting worse, unfortunately. And so I think the more books we have out there, just educating kids and letting them know, like, this is a serious issue nowadays.
And these books are a really powerful tool, so we want to thank you for writing this book. So I want to know, what was it like for you, and how old were you when you found out? Tell us when you found out that you had AIDS, because you were born with it. It wasn't anything, you know, it was, your mother had a blood transfusion, I guess. Was that the case?
No. So my mom, she contracted HIV from my father.
Okay.
And she didn't know until I was about 2.5 years old, and then she found out about me right before my 3rd birthday. And her and I, we've actually never reached the point of an AIDS diagnosis. We both are still HIV positive. We both take just 1 pill a day. And I grew up, you know, like any normal kid. My mom never made me feel any different that I was taking medicine. And kind of as I got older, I had questions, and I was curious, and I was like, you know, why am I taking this medicine? And, you know, I put the pieces together, finally talked to my mom about it, and I was in 5th grade, I was 12 years old, and even when she told me, I was still so young, I didn't understand what it meant at all. I didn't understand that there was that stigma until middle school, and once I told my best friend and spread throughout the entire school, that's when I realized, okay, this is a disease that, you know, people are going to judge me. People aren't going to accept me for it, even though it's no fault of my own. Right.
But also, too, I think, I mean, and what you're doing by going around and speaking so much about anti-bullying, but about everything, but it's all the misinformation that's out there about HIV being positive, or people who have AIDS. People don't have the information they need to think correctly about this whole issue.
Yeah, HIV, it's, you know, we've come such a long way. It's been around for years and years. We've come such a long way, but we still have such a long way to go, I feel like. And people still think you can catch it from someone coughing on you or saliva or urine off a toilet seat. And that's just, it's not the case, and it's just sad. And I think, you know, that's also, you know, why I love going and speaking, just to get kids to realize that it's not that way. Like, you can take just 1 pill a day now, and you can live a normal life. You can have kids. They have medicine actually out now that your partner can take to prevent them from getting it. And so it's like we have all these ways, and, you know, people with HIV, they're just like people with any other illness.
Right. So writing this book, I mean, was it hard to sit down and relive some of those memories? At least, you know, a lot of the bullying that you had to suffer through and experience? Or was it, for you, was it just sort of a catharsis, sort of a way to get it out and to put it on paper so others could read about this?
When I first started writing the book, it was really hard, because there were some things, like, I had my general story. I had gone out and spoken and shared my story numerous times, but there were still some things that I didn't share when I went and spoke. There were some things that I still, you know, kept to myself. And so when it came to, you know, my co-author, she's sitting there, she's like, well, I need more detail. She's like, tell me more about this. They're going to want to know about this. And so when it came to the situation, I mean, I ended up in the stress center when I was in high school because I had attempted suicide. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me to talk about, just because it wasn't something I normally talked about. And I had to think about the details of, you know, when kids were making up that nickname Paige, and when I was getting called it at school, she was like, well, where were you? what were the colors of the
Yeah.
locker, what,
Yeah.
what were the kids' expressions. And so I think the hardest part was having to sit and think about the details. And even when I was doing the editing and rereading the book, there were times where I had to sit the book down
sure,
and be like,
sure.
okay, I need a break. But then I'd get upset and I'd realize, okay, this is how other kids feel when they are
Yeah.
going through it.
Well, sure.
And that's kind of what keeps me going and keeps me pushing
Right.
forward, because I'm like, I want to help other people.
So telling a friend in middle school, which is right, it's so great that you're talking to so many middle schools while you're here for our citywide read program. But is there anything, was it after finishing the book, did you feel like you left yourself open because you had revealed so much of what your inner self, or was it, in looking back at it, was really a good thing that you had done this for yourself?
I think I personally love that I wrote the book, and even some of my closest friends, they didn't know about a lot of the stuff I talked about in the book. So when the book first came out, I was nervous, and my friends were like, we're buying your book, and they started reading it, and I'm freaking out thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to think different of me, they're not going to see me as the same person. And I received nothing but positive responses from my friends and from my family that read the book.
Cool.
And I think now looking back, I feel, yes, it's like an open book. So,
but for sure.
Everyone kind of knows everything about me now, but I think it makes it easier for me because I feel like I'm finally able to really truly be myself and talk to these kids about things. And I think that's what helped me go deeper and go deeper in my book, because those are the types of moments, those are the types of things that are going to help the kids and make them connect and really see and be able to inspire them.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, sharing those innermost feelings and the details of the things that were done to you, I think can really point out to kids that they shouldn't repeat any of this, no matter what the situation is. Yeah, and choose kind before anything gets out.
Yeah, I always, today, both times I spoke, I just emphasize to both the groups, I'm like, think about what you say before you say it, before what you're thinking about doing, because you never know how it's going to affect someone. And by the time you realize how it's affected them, they could have taken their own life, and you can't take back what you said or what you did. And it's sad that so many kids, like young kids, are now resulting to suicide and resulting to cutting. And it's like, when I was that age, I didn't get to that point in thinking of those things until I was in high school. And so now looking back, it's like these kids are getting, it's younger and younger, and elementary school kids are even doing it now. And it's like, okay, this book couldn't have come out in the most perfect time, because it's just becoming such an issue.
Right, for sure. So tell us about what you do and the programs you get, because I know you're very involved in getting out there as a speaker. So tell us a little about that and what's next for you and your message and what you're doing, because you are doing such incredible things. So
now I'm just traveling across the country. I'm speaking to different schools at different events, and especially I talk a lot about Camp Kendall, Project Kendall in my book, a camp where it's for kids and teens infected or affected by HIV/AIDS, and I'm now a counselor at that camp, and it's one of the most amazing things I go to every year. I look forward to it every summer, and just to be able to help those kids that are positive or have family members to understand, yes, HIV, we've come a long way, but that stigma's still there, and once you disclose, you can't take it back. But I mean, now I know that, with this book, I want to go and write a children's book series now. I'm working on it, so I want it kind of reflective on my story to kind of help kids understand bullying, help younger kids understand, there are going to be kids with chronic illnesses, but they're just the same as everyone else. They just have this one little thing that makes them special, but special in a good way, not a bad way. And now I'm going to college. I'm currently taking this year off to travel and do the book and everything, but I'm wanting to do molecular biology. I want to do HIV/AIDS medicine research. So I want to go even further and even deeper into that community.
You are going to accomplish so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that is so great. Well, I want to thank you for being a part of our Naperville Reads program, and come back and see us when your next books come out.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I love
it. This was an easy thing.
Thank you.
Great conversations with 3 brilliant nonfiction authors who are part of Naperville Reads, our community-wide reading program. They were Paige Rawls and her book, Positive, all about living HIV positive. Sally Walker and her new book called Winnie the Pooh, and all of her other incredible nonfiction books. And then Sarah Albee and her new book, Why'd They Wear That? Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.